If it is possible to create a perfect religion, then what would that religion be like? That religion would most of all be an attitude based on insight, an attitude based on the acknowledgement that we always exist inside our own interpretation machine. If we acknowledge the fact that we always live inside our own interpretation machine, then the perfect religion will emerge by itself, because it will make religion an open space of reflection, contemplation, and especially of an experiential reality that we can achieve and have in our own selves. To experience our own inner self, the self behind the self, the heart inside the heart, to have the experience of this would be a perfect religion. And to have the insight and the acknowledgement of the fact that as soon as we go into thinking and conceptualizing, we will always be in our own interpretation machine. This will make religion truly human. And it will leave out all fundamentalism, of course. There would be no reason to kill each other because some person has a different mindset than another person, because we always live inside our own interpretation machine. Whatever we do, whatever we think, we live inside our own interpretation machine. So the perfect religion is to acknowledge this and to live with the insight that the experiential reality of our inner heart, of our inner self, of the self behind the self, of the heart inside the heart, is more important than concepts, ideas, and thinking, which will only result in theology. We don't need theology, we need to know that the experiential reality of our true selves, of ourselves, inside ourselves, is more important and more meaningful to us than the concepts that we make. If it was possible to create a perfect science or a perfect attitude towards science, a perfect attitude towards scientific research, then what would that be? Well, it would be an insight and an acknowledgement of the fact that we always live inside our own interpretation machine. That the human program will make it practically impossible for us to see the truth of reality, because the human program interprets everything. We know that for a fact. So the awareness of this, of the fact that we always live not only inside the human program, which limits our understanding and experience and perception of the world, but also inside our own interpretation machine, which makes it even more difficult to be precise and to mirror that which is actual reality. If it was possible to create a perfect philosophy, what would that be? A perfect philosophy has to deal with the human program. A perfect philosophy must explain the existence of the human program, and it must explain the existence of the interpretation machine. A philosophy without the explanation and the acknowledgement of the interpretation machine is not philosophy, but romantic, so to speak. It's just a work of poetry, it's a work of fiction, which is nice and valuable as fiction, as a narrative, as romance, so to speak, or as thinking, but not valuable in a truly scientific sense, and philosophy has to be scientific in some way. Without the acknowledgement of the human program itself and of the interpretation machine, then of course all philosophy, every philosophy, will be a language game, which in fact everything is in any case. Everything is a language game. Politics is a set of language games. Religion is a set of language games. Language games are actually all we have. So we need to see beyond the language game, of course. And in order to see beyond the language game, we need to understand the human program and the way that we produce knowledge, because of how we relate to language and how we give validity to language and to thought and to concepts that of course do not have validity other than in being language games that are more or less precise. But philosophy must know that everything is a language game. Every philosophy is a language game. Everything that we conceptualize is a language game. And it is made up in the way that it is because of our belief in thought and language. We believe in the validity of thought and language, so we produce language games. But we have to see beyond this and recognize how the human program and the interpretation machine works. If it was possible to create a perfect artwork and a perfect art life and a perfect attitude for the reception of art, then what would that be? It would be the same. It would be to acknowledge that we live inside our own interpretation machine and that art is a result of the interpretation machine. Art is a result of the way that the human program delivers the world to us. And it is a result of how we react individually to that which the human program presents and delivers to us. So, if it is possible to create a perfect religion, which it is, then it must be based on the fact that we are inside our own interpretation machine. If it was possible to create a perfect attitude towards science and scientific research, then it would be exactly the same to acknowledge the fact that we live inside our own interpretation machine and that we are that which activates the interpretation machine, and that the human program is a lens with which we measure things in the way that we create that which we measure. The human program is producing the results that we measure. They are not necessarily something that comes from reality. They come from the human program itself, from the way that the human program receives and interprets data. So, if we need to build a better future, which we absolutely and truly need, then we should be aware of this. The best thing that we can do for the development of science, of art, of philosophy and religion is to understand and acknowledge the human program and the interpretation machine and how we live in it and with it. Amen.